Government considers raising civil servants' retirement age. A Chinese tourist and a hotel receptionist kidnapped by gunmen in Sabah. And yet another shooting spree at a Texas Army base.
Hello and a very good evening. The government is considering raising the retirement age for newly recruited civil servants from 60 to 65. Existing officers, meanwhile, can apply to their departments to continue to work upon their retirement. Jenny Lam reports.
An increasing number of civil servants will reach their retirement age over the next 10 years. Given an aging population, the government fears there won't be enough young blood to take over the jobs. The proposal is to raise civil servants' retirement age from 60 to 65, for disciplinary services from 55 to 57 and possibly to 60 if approved.
That means the government contribution will increase, so that's why we need to ascertain how much the financial, long-term financial implications.
There is no timetable yet for when a new retirement age will come into effect. Meanwhile, there are three options for existing civil servants who want to work until they're 65 years old. First, change the post-retirement employment mechanism so that they can work for an extra 5 years. Second, introduce new criteria for approval, for example, with the transfer of their knowledge and experience being the main considerations. And third, introduce post-retirement contracts in the government to allow officers to take up non-directorate posts after the retirement age and relax restrictions to allow frontline civil servants to work in the private sector soon after retiring from the government.
We would allow the heads of departments more flexibility to employ civil servants who have reached the retirement age beyond their retirement age, but on the condition that it shouldn't unduly affect the promotion opportunities of younger officers.
The proposals are subject to 4 months of public consultation. Leung Chau-ting, chairman of the Federation of Civil Service Unions, believes the proposals are viable, but he has urged the government to make sure that there is no favoritism within individual departments when deciding who is allowed to extend their terms of service and who isn't. Jenny Lam, CVB News.
Chinese officials have been sent to Malaysia after a Chinese tourist and a Malaysian hotel receptionist were seized by suspected Filipino insurgents in Malaysia. The incident happened at a dive resort in Sabah State in eastern Malaysia. The attackers fled in a speedboat, taking the abductees along with them. The Chinese tourist is a 29-year-old woman from Shanghai. Photographs taken on a mobile phone during the incident showed people crouching behind overturned tables and men holding rifles standing near the hotel's entrance. The abduction underscores persistent security threats in Sabah, a popular tourist destination just a short boat ride from the southern Philippines, which has long been home to Muslim militants and kidnap gangs. Leaders of Malaysia and Australia say the search for the missing Malaysian Airlines jetliner will not stop until all answers are found. James Aitken has more on a search that's being called one of the most difficult in human history.
An international air crash investigation team with analysts from 7 countries is coordinating dozens of air searches along with a small armada of ships. But nearly a month after it vanished from radar screens, there is still no trace of flight MH370. So today, at the base in Perth that is serving as a hub for the multinational effort, the leaders of Malaysia and Australia offered assurance.
Every day, working on the basis of just small pieces of information, we are putting the jigsaw together. And every day we have a higher degree of confidence that we know more about what happened to this ill-fated flight.
I know that until we find a plane, many families cannot start to grieve. I cannot imagine what they must be going through. But I can promise them that we will not give up.
The investigation into the tragedy remains Malaysia's responsibility, but Australia is coordinating the ocean search. Today, the man in charge of coordinating that search put the effort into perspective.
This is one of the most demanding and challenging search and rescue operations or search and recovery operations that I have ever seen, and I think probably one of the most complex operations of this nature that the world has seen.
As further data trickles into investigators, the target search area in the southern Indian Ocean becomes more defined, but it is still vast. At 223,000 square kilometers, it is about the size of the U.S. state of Minnesota. Meanwhile, police are now probing deeper into the backgrounds of the pilots and crew for anything suggesting a hijacking or sabotage. Background checks of the 227 passengers on board have not turned up anything suspicious. But authorities have not ruled out anything, including mechanical error in the mystery of the doomed jet. James Aiken, TVB News.
There's been yet another deadly shooting at the U.S. Army base of Fort Hood in Texas. A gunman went on the rampage and killed 3 soldiers before turning the weapon on himself. U.S. President Barack Obama has described the incident as heartbreaking, but wouldn't offer further comments until an investigation is completed. For the second time in 5 years, a deadly shooting rampage at the U.S. Army base in Fort Hood, Texas.
A soldier assigned to 13th Sustainment Command Expeditionary fired shots at individuals within the unit areas here, within the 1st Medical Brigade area and the 49th Transportation Battalion area.
According to Army officials, the gunman drove to 2 buildings on the base and opened fire before he was confronted by military police. The incident lasted between 15 and 20 minutes before he shot himself fatally in the head.
We have confirmed that there are 3 victims who were killed, and then the shooter was killed. And there are 16 injured, being treated at Scott and White and here at Darnell.
While officials wouldn't confirm the identity of the shooter, local media identified him as Ivan Lopez, who had served in Iraq in 2011 and was being treated for anxiety and depression. Officials weren't sure what the motive was, but ruled out terrorism. The victims were rushed to a nearby hospital, many suffering from serious gunshot wounds.
The situation appears to be, at this point, pretty well contained, and that's the extent of the folks that we are anticipating getting in our facilities for further care. All of these patients are in our ICU.
The gunman apparently bought his firearm from a local store and smuggled it into the base. Guns are strictly controlled at bases, and other than military police, soldiers are not normally allowed to carry them. US President Barack Obama said the incident was tragic.
We're heartbroken that something like this might have happened again. And I don't want to comment on the facts until I know exactly what has happened. But for now, I would just hope that everybody across the country is keeping the families and the community of Fort Hood in our thoughts and in our prayers.
The last time this happened at Fort Hood was in 2009, when a mass shooting left 13 soldiers dead and 32 wounded. Major Nidal Hassan was sentenced to death for that attack. Residents of Chile's northern coastal region have spent a second sleepless night outside their homes after a major aftershock rattled the area. The region was hit a day earlier by a magnitude 8.2 earthquake that claimed 6 lives. No new major damage or casualties were reported after the 7.6 magnitude aftershock struck late Wednesday. The authorities issued a tsunami alert and ordered an evacuation of low-lying areas for the country's entire Pacific coastline. The aftershock caused buildings to shake and people to run out into the streets in the port of Inque, one of the cities that saw damage from Tuesday night's quake. The aftershock was felt across the border in southern Peru.
Ukraine's ousted president conceded he made a mistake when he invited Russian troops into Crimea. Viktor Yanukovych vowed to negotiate with Russian President Vladimir Putin to get the Black Sea Peninsula back for Ukraine.
In his first interview since fleeing Ukraine in February amid violent protests, Viktor Yanukovych called Crimea a major tragedy. He said he acted on his emotions, and he was wrong. Yanukovych said he's spoken to Vladimir Putin just 3 times since he arrived in Russia, just once in person, describing their talks as difficult. He said he hopes to have more meetings with the Russian leader to negotiate Crimea's return to Ukraine. While there is no expectation that Russia will roll back its annexation, Yanukovych's statements could widen Putin's options in talks to settle the crisis. It could create the impression that Moscow might be open to discussion on Crimea's future. Meanwhile, NATO foreign ministers wrapped up a 2-day meeting about Crimea in Brussels yesterday after suspending all cooperation with Russia Tuesday. NATO Secretary General again warned Russia against further incursion into Ukrainian territory.
That would lead to further isolation, international isolation of Russia. It would have far-reaching consequences for the relations between Russia and what we as a whole might call the Western world.
The U.S. State Department said it's augmenting its NATO operations in the Black Sea and Baltic region in response to Russia's escalation.
We have been very clear that if the Russians don't de-escalate, we will take steps in response to their escalation. So that's what we've done.
Moscow accused the U.S. and NATO of reverting to Cold War jousting by suspending cooperation with Russia. A foreign ministry spokesman noted that the last time NATO took such a decision, over Russia's 5-day war in Georgia in 2008, the alliance later resumed cooperation of its own accord. Alan Buknia, TVB News.
Elsewhere in Europe, faced with a voter backlash at the polls, French President François Hollande is looking to revive his presidency with help from a surprising quarter. Ségolène Royal, the mother of his 4 children. Royal, a high-profile socialist in her own right, was tipped overnight to take over as Minister of Environment and Energy in the new government named by Hollande. It follows a crushing defeat for the Socialist Party in municipal elections last Sunday. Her return to government caps a remarkable comeback for Royal, who has been in the political wilderness since losing to Nicolas Sarkozy in the French presidential election of 2007.
And still ahead tonight. A new bill in Taiwan to monitor cross-strait agreements. A call for a 35,000-seat performance venue in Hong Kong. And the public warned to guard against dengue fever and Japanese encephalitis.